While we have previously discussed on the Jewish Drinking Show the 4 cups of wine, what about drinking between the cups of wine? That's something we're going to be discussing on this 154th episode of the Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life.
L'chaim.
This episode was recorded in front of a live wine drinking audience in which we went through 20 different texts throughout Jewish tradition, investigating what to do about drinking between cups of wine, the 4 statutory cups at the Seder. Love to hear your feedback. If you have questions, additional sources, texts, please email me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. And now let's get into the episode.
They mix for the 3rd cup, and he recites the blessing over his food. The 4th cup of wine, the 4th one completes Hallel over it and recites the blessing of the song upon it. If one wants to drink between these cups, one may drink, but not between the 3rd and the 4th cups.
Really clearly here in the Mishnah, between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, totally fine. Drink what you want. Between 3 and 4, hold off. Don't drink between 3 and 4. I'm going to very explicitly tell you we're talking just between the cups tonight, not outside of the cups. Because once you have the 1st cup, which is Kiddush, that really kicks everything off. But before the 1st cup, you're not supposed to be drinking. However, fun little fact in the Talmud, Rava, who is not only one of the most significant rabbis in all of the Talmud, but he also is the biggest wine lover in the Talmud. How would he prepare on the afternoon day of leading up to Pesach? He'd drink wine all afternoon. So he would, and actually the question was, how are you allowed to do this, since you are not allowed to do anything that could cause you to fill up and not be as hungry for matzah, because that is a very key piece of what you want to do. You want to hold off on any meals in the afternoon leading up to Pesach, because we want you to hunger after, to desire matzah. That's very important. He says, what are you talking about? This doesn't fill me up. This only encourages my appetite to really want and desire that matzah. So he's, yeah, right. So he says, no, Adarabah, it's exactly the opposite. It's actually helpful for the matzah. As to after the 4th cup, that is an entirely separate conversation that leads us also into a separate conversation about the 5th cup, which will potentially be a future topic. There's nothing in the Babylonian Talmud that really addresses this. There is, however, something in the Yerushalmi that actually does.
Jerusalem, Talmud Pesachim 10:6-3. Why that he should not get drunk? Is he not already drunk? What is the difference between wine with the meal and wine after the meal? Wine after the meal intoxicates. Wine with the meal does not intoxicate.
Awesome. So, pretty clear.
Bold statement.
Yeah.
Right, because right, according to this text, prior to the meal, during the meal, have as much wine as you want. You're going to be eating anyways. After the meal, then it's just going to cause you drunkenness. Like, that's it. Like, it's just a slippery slope down. According to this text, that's what we have for rabbinic material. Medieval material. This is not a wide range of medieval material, but there's certainly relevant medieval material for us to consider.
And if one wants to drink even many cups, he may do so. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yoel Halevi of Bonn, 1140-1225, wrote, as long as one intends not to bless a second time, which would look as if one was adding to the cups.
All right, thank you. So he's really more speaking about between cups 1 and 2. And this is fine, but there might be a concern that it could look as if you're having a whole bunch of cups. That could be confusing to people. How many cups are we having this evening? But that, a touch of caution, not a whole lot. So text 4, later on the Torah writes about between 3 and 4. He says, you do 3, you bless, you do heseba, you do leaning, you don't bless afterwards according to my father. And if you do, don't do between 3 and 4. Again, no disagreement from what we've seen.
But you missed that if you want to have to drink more, you can mess up and not lean over anymore.
That is true. So I don't know. Yes, there's that, and that continues. I'm pretty sure that just continues on through the years. I probably have some texts that speak to that. You're right. Between what happens if you don't lean on one of the cups, then you just drink again, and that's totally fine. That's well within, it's required even. Yes. So there's no.
That's a beautiful loop.
It is. Oops! I forgot to lean. Let me try it again. Fill it up. Yeah. Yeah, I
Saw that cutscene.
yeah, exactly. So text 5 here, Rabbi Cairo. So he's commenting. He says this is again between 1 and 2. He says if you want, you can have these. He mentions this is that Mishnah that we saw in text number 1. He says the Kolbo wrote, it's possible to say that between the first and the second, you shouldn't drink kadesh l'ishtaker in order that you don't get drunk. Because if you between cups 1 and 2 get drunk, that will hold you back from properly doing the actual Haggadah, actually doing the Seder. That could be if you get already drunk that early on in the Seder, that will mess up what you're actually there to accomplish. That could be a huge problem. It continues. It says between 3 and 4. It's not. It doesn't. It doesn't describe 1 and 2 because people. He says it's not really that often that people are drinking that much or necessarily getting that drunk between 1 and 2. That's why they're putting on in rabbinic literature. They didn't talk about it because how common is this that people are getting drunk that early on in the Seder?
I mean, easily, though,
Yeah.
between 1 and 2 is the longest gap.
Right.
It is.
Yeah, I know.
Or is it between? No, so you pour 2, but you wait so long.
Right.
in 2.
You're
So
sitting on cup 2 for a long time.
That's I think the thing that
Yeah.
from a practical standpoint, that's always the thing, because you've had 1, right?
Yeah.
2, you got a lot of work to do to get through like Magi, and you're like, can I drink some of this wine and then just refill before we get to the next one?
That is a
And so
fantastic question.
I'm hoping we can get like somewhat of an answer to that question. Maybe there is no answer to that question, but I think that's the point. That's the
key.
pressure point.
If the
It
answer
is.
is no, I need to leave the room.
How do we get through our Seders? He says, Harav Rabbi Yonasan wrote that wine before the meal does not intoxicate. Nevertheless, he says, nevertheless, one should be careful not to drink at all except for a great need, which is an interesting, like what constitutes need and what constitutes great, and and he's not necessarily saying he agrees or disagrees. It's just an interesting consideration of a medieval rabbi that, so we've had 2 pieces now that we're now kind of concerned. Maybe we should not necessarily, first of all, maybe we shouldn't be drinking to the point of getting drunk. That's a reason maybe to hold back between 1 and 2. And here also that maybe you shouldn't at all unless there's a great need, which I'm not really sure what great need means. So that's a piece of it. And then we have text 6 here. He says, now this is going back between 3 and 4. He again mentions the Mishnah. He says, and the reason is explained in the Yerushalmi, Kadesh L'Ishtaker Klomar V'Shabbat Maligmor Et HaHalel, which now he's continuing on the Yerushalmi, not just simply that you're getting drunk, but specifically not to get drunk in order that you, I forgot to do the Hallel. I forgot to finish and complete the Hallel between 3 and 4. Because the 4th cup, you're supposed to complete the Hallel on the 4th cup according to the Mishnah. And if you drink so much between cups 3 and 4, you get drunk, you forget the Hallel, then
If one wants to drink 20 cups, okay, you have permission to do so. Excellent. Nevertheless, it's proper not to drink between the first and second cup if there's no great need. There's always a great need, so that he won't get drunk and be prevented from performing the Seder and the reading of Haggadah. We just did this, didn't we?
Well, no. We saw the Beit Yosef, and now it was the Beit Yosef quoting an earlier rabbi, but now he codified it. This whole great need thing.
Okay, now we codified it.
Yeah, it wasn't in Gemara, it wasn't in the Torah. It was just the one Rishon that Beit Yosef quoted, and now he threw it into Shulchan Aruch. Aside from the one Rishon that Rabbi Kara liked, included it, but no one else is saying you just need a great need. In the Mishnah, it was fine. The other Rishon, it's fine. So that's interesting.
It's kind of the deal that if you know you would still be able to perform the Seder and read the Haggadah, then you can self-manage.
Oh,
That seems to be
right. The idea is
right,
that like
that's
different
a concern,
people might behave differently under different or have different tolerances, and so the idea is like as long as you can ensure and based on your track record you can still perform the Seder and read the Haggadah.
Yeah, we got a long night, not just the Haggadah. I mean, obviously that's a huge concern, but don't forget the other stuff at the back end.
Right.
With spring arriving, that means Passover is right around the corner. To help provide you insights and more into Jewish drinking at this time of year, where else to turn to than jewishdrinking.com? In addition to multiple episodes over the course of multiple years of episodes of the Jewish Drinking Show, there are also resources at jewishdrinking.com to provide insights, whether it's articles and more. Feel free to check out jewishdrinking.com/Passover to check out those resources. L'chaim.
After eating afikomen, we mix the third cup and bless the grapes after meals and the crate of the fruit of the vine. And one drink it while reciting. One either blesses a post-consumption blessing of this is a really awkward translation. Upon his third cup, nor should one drink wine between the third and fourth cup.
You know what? This was not my translation. So.
I know, that's why.
No, some of them are, but this was not. So far, we haven't read anything about between 2 and 3. We now have seen in text 7 and also text 6 about what about between 1 and 2. Right now, between text 3 and 4, that's holding pretty steady as you're not allowed to.
However, one is able to drink many times from the third cup, and all of it is considered as one drinking, even though one interrupts between these drinkings.
So we have flexibility. Hey, I know we need to talk about what happens if you forgot to lean. And I don't know if you want to say forgot to lean, but either way, for the third and or fourth cups, then you then have to re-drink and lean. But here, it's interesting, even though, what?
You didn't put it in that context.
Right. Here, it's just like, who's to say it's just one cup? Maybe you just keep refilling the cup. It's all still that third cup.
Yeah, it's not the port, it's the actual vessel. It's the cup.
That's right. Right. So you got to give credit to Rabbi Yisrael here. Hey, it's not multiplicity of drinkings. It's all one continuous drinking. Like, hey, loopholes.
One should neither eat more than sufficiently nor drink more than appropriately, so that one should not eat the afikomen with coarse eating, or even to get drunk and sleep immediately.
Yes, thank you. So here we have caution and concern between 2 and 3. And it is interesting. People, like even in the Mishnah, they even specifically, sleep does not occur that frequently in the Mishnah, but it does occur when talking about the Seder because, it's late. People are drinking. People are eating. People can doze off. It literally happens in the Mishnah. They're like, what happens if some of the people at the Seder doze off, but not all of them? And they know that slumber may occur during the course of Seder. That can occur. And here they acknowledges, you can fall asleep, but even setting aside sleep as a potential outcome of drunkenness during the course of the meal, I mean, it wouldn't be the first person to have a lot of food and wine and fall asleep after consuming all that, right? So that's a clear and obvious concern that remains throughout all of human history. But that's just, a note of caution. Look, we can have a lot, whether wine or food, but maybe have some caution, right? That's not that's actually not crazy. It's just saying, be careful. Don't get too carried away with your consumption. We touched upon Shulchan Aruch and also Rabbi Israelis' Mapah, his tablecloth. We're doing between cups 3 and 4. We'll separately do between cups 1 and 2. Spoiler alert, you look on the backside, you'll see there's not really a lot of conversation about between 2 and 3, at least that I found. There's probably a lot of writings on this, but for our purposes this evening, not a lot of commentary on Rabbi Israelis' caution about not getting too full or too drunk during the meal.
Maybe it doesn't require any commentary, or is that possible to say that the Achronim decided something that required commentary?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it was just a big mic drop by Rabbi Israelis. He was like, okay, everybody agreed.
I mean, that's not like the Achronim.
Right. They don't have opinions. All right. No, yeah. That's their job. Anyway, so we're going to get to between 1 and 2. That will be our final sheet. But for now, between 3 and 4, here's what we're going to get from Rabbi Circus, his new house, his Beit Chadash. So he writes here, text 11, that you shouldn't have everything is going to be between 3 and 4. This is going to be a lot simpler. We're not trying to really say that you can. And also, it's obviously pretty set in place. It's pretty set in stone. We're not going to be drinking betwixt these 2 cups. And he says, but what about, you're not allowed to drink wine, but what happens about other matters that you are permitted to consume? Maybe there is something about that. And if the concern, as mentioned in the Yerushalmi, is about not getting drunk, What about non-intoxicating beverages between these third and fourth cups, if that is indeed the concern? Because ultimately, the real concern is then maybe Vishka, you'll forget Malik more at the Hallel. You'll forget to actually complete the Hallel. That's really what that fourth cup is about. So let's just not get intoxicated. Okay, Mordechai wrote, the reason is kamechse kamosiv al dal kosos. Maybe it appears, as we saw earlier, what about between 1 and 2? Maybe it'll appear you're adding on to cups here. What if you're adding between 3 and 4? So, and maybe, yeah, between the first 2 cups, what's a common time anyways to drink? It's a really fascinating assumption. Yeah, that's a pretty common time to drink a bunch of cups. But here, this is a less common time because maybe you're not necessarily trying to generate your thirst, your hunger for these things. Really interesting, though, he does write at the end, but Tosfos Kasu, that the tam shali vatel tam matzav lo iri ela b'yayin v'lo mayim. That there's also now this concern that what happens if you drink now between these third and fourth cups? You'll lose out on the flavor of the matzah, the afikoman, by having this wine, which isn't right, and you're still going to have 4. So it's I too share your concern about how reasonable this is of a concern.
Put an extra focus on the afikoman being a major part of the Seder.
So
and there's a lot to be said for one, finishing, right? I think the focus on one, finishing Hallel, and 2, eating the afikoman and enjoying the afikoman and
right. So if I remember correctly, this could also have been in a dream, or it could have been a podcast. It's true that I heard it somewhere that maybe, or there was earlier concern of not eating post afikoman, lest you lose the flavor of the afikoman in your mouth, and that's why you shouldn't eat any more food post afikoman, right? So let me say that again. There's a concern that you will, if you eat any other foods, you lose out on keeping that taste of the afikoman in your mouth. Now, this is really fascinating because now they're taking that from food and saying, well, what about wine? Which is interesting because we already know statutorily we're having at least not 1, but 2 cups of wine post afikoman. That never arose as a concern. So clearly it was, but now this is becoming articulated. I guess Tosfos also mentioned this, but that's interesting. Of course we're having wine. They're just having wine and matzah in our mouth. Hey there. Hope you've been enjoying this episode so far. I want to break in and give you a sneak peek to our next episode.
People have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. Wine tends to be, for many people, unfortunately, kind of a more expertise-driven thing in people's head. So I guess people were less likely to argue about, not anymore, but back in the day. But if you would write something negative about a restaurant that somebody else liked, they felt like they had their own opinion and you were clearly wrong. And
wow,
the juice was not worth the squeeze.
I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into our next episode. Please note that will not be coming out until after Passover. In the meantime, I hope you have a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a really wonderful Passover. Now, back into this episode. So 12, this is Rabbi David Alevi Siegel. He lives in Poland. He says, he mentions the Yerushalmi. Again, this is all still between 3 and 4. He says, what about if you're already drunk? He mentions mead. He says, maybe you shouldn't be drinking mead also because that can be mishaker. And avashar mashkim sheinu mishaker mutar meid devash, but he means mead. But it's interesting because he's saying, between 3 and 4, you're allowed having non-intoxicating beverages, but intoxicating beverages, not just wine. So mead, obviously, but that would include, your kosher for Passover tequila. These are items that should not be consumed at this point in the Seder.
Ooh, that's an interesting
So the
word.
most
Yeah.
of the vodka, we have to wait till after the third.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because mead, there's a lot to talk about mead when it comes to the Seder. Who knows? Maybe that's a subject of an entirely separate conversation. But, whereas this is a fun Seder trivia question, which is normally the rest of the year, if you don't have wine and you need to do kiddush, you need to do certain things, you can get away with beer. That's great. But when it comes to the Seder, beer is entirely off limits. That's not an option. So what can you have in lieu of if you don't have wine, and you clearly can't have beer, obviously, I guess you could have cider. I don't know how, you have your England, France. I don't know how widespread cider was, but mead was pretty widespread in Europe. So it does talk about in different. So
fermented honey.
Yeah, it's fermented honey. So you could. There is. I think it's Rabbi Yisraelis, or there's definitely. It's a whole separate conversation about mead, using mead instead of wine if you don't have access to wine for your Seder. We have Rabbi Spira here. In order to not get drunk, he said, I talked about elsewhere, I wrote elsewhere about intoxicating beverages, but for, non-intoxicating beverages, those would be fine between 3 and 4. So we get to Rabbi Kagan in his Mishnah Berurah. He says the concern, again, is not to get drunk and then falling asleep, not finishing Hallel. He says there's also some who wrote on account of it looks like you're adding cups. And he says, others say it doesn't have to necessarily be wine specifically, even other intoxicating beverages. But he says, but if it doesn't, that's fine. As long as, it's not the Chamar Medina, maybe a mead or cider, whatever it is. And if it is, maybe you should, yesh lachmer, you should be stringent, or chosh, l'tam hasheni dinar kamosi v'alkosas. Don't make it look as if you're adding cups between these 3 and 4. And then 15 in his Biur Halacha, he goes more in depth. He says, regarding this whole Chamar Medina, which literally just means wine in the land, even Ma'at lo yishta, you shouldn't even have a little bit. Nevertheless, this is all according to Yerushalmi, because you don't want to get drunk and then not be able to complete Hallel. And he says, lo hitiru chachami afilu mashu chutz midaled kosos. Nobody should drink more than 4 cups. He says, however, there's also this concern about mosif al kosos. What if you're adding to the cups? And so this is, maybe it's only if you're having enough that is the amount for an actual cup's worth, a few ounces, right? So if you're having less than that, maybe that could be. And then he says, what Rabbi Yisraelis wrote, b'chol machshev shtia achas lamar, that means to say afilu haya banishar shiur revis tzarchin, and that's as long as you still have like enough for this revis aspect. But he says he does leave off, as he often does. It requires further inquiry. That like what when Rabbi Yisraelis threw this out there, like you just have this long, continuous, drawn out third cup, and you just keep sipping from this. Like what does that mean? I'm not even really like with this Tzarachin. I'm not even really sure what this means. I don't really know how this works. Even if you had this Shiur review still remaining, so I'm not. Which is interesting. He didn't say. Sometimes he just comes down and says definitively, but here he's saying I'm not really sure the mechanics of what this means. So, but that is fascinating. Maybe you can still have this mechanic of just this loophole. Or maybe you have like, I don't know, less than a revis, and you just pour a little bit more. This is still part of the third cup, isn't it? And then you get a little bit lower. It's still the third cup, isn't it? Right? You're trying to be demonstrative to everybody else. This is not adding on to the cups. I don't want anybody, misunderstanding this is a 7th cup. No. It's just all continuation of my 3rd cup. I'm not adding onto any of these cups.
I was surprised they didn't define, like, make sure your glass is empty, or here's how long of a break you can take before you get DQ'd.
Right. Well, that actually is probably why he threw that last Tzarchian at the end. Like, I'm not really sure how this works. Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways, because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right, thank you so much. Now back into the show. So our denouement, at least for the evening, again, I mentioned we are not touching or otherwise tackling post-Cup 4. That deserves its own separate treatment. But for the purposes of this evening. So once again, we get back to Rabbi Circus here in text 16. He says, what if you want to, quoting this Mishnah, what if you want to drink all these between 1 and 2? he quotes the Mishnah. He says Rashbam wrote. It says in the Yerushalmi all these things. He says, you still have to say Hallel. He says, all these different things. What about even between the first one and the second one, maintaining this concern about drunkenness? Like, there are consequences. Like, if you're going heavy on the drinking early on, that can mess up your ability to say the rest of all these different things. Maybe actually it can cause thirst, hunger, all these different things. So you want to still be able to eat the matzah while hungry. You still want to be able to do this. And he actually pushes back against all these things. And no, what are you talking about? And I think this actually, I know I mentioned, right, exactly. He's taking what I mentioned about Rava in the Bavli. He says, I'm drinking all this wine, the whole Erev Pesach, leading up to Pesach, in order to generate a hunger for the matzah. That's actually, it's great Pesach prep. I'm drinking wine all afternoon in order to generate a hunger for this matzah. And now he's quoting the Mordechai as saying, who basically is, being influenced by Rava, actually, you're totally allowed to drink between cups 1 and 2 in order to generate a further hunger for this matzah, which is what this night is. It's very important for our consumptive practices.
Right. Because nobody naturally craves matzah.
So this is a really great pushback, not only what we have seen about between cups 1 and 2, but even, spoiler alert, what we will see. But this is a really fascinating point by Mordechai here to say, no, it can cause a greater hunger for this. Rabbi Reicher from the late 17th, early 18th century, again, this concern about, now he's actually quoting the Shulchan Aruch of not getting drunk between these cups 1 and 2. I'm sorry, between cups 1 and 2. He says maybe, he says, Mashma deshar mashkin she'enu mashakrim mutar lishtot. So what about water, other non-alcoholic beverages? That could be fine. He says, Lefi mashkasuf ha-Mordechai. So now he's even referencing this. He says, even it is fine. You can have wine in order to cause generate a greater hunger for this matzah consumption. It says others, maybe it's off limits, because maybe like tequila or something like that, maybe they wouldn't generate the same sense of hunger for this matzah like tequila. Nice tequila reference here. Again, he says, really, we are concerned about adding on cups, or it would seem as if one is adding upon cups, not actually adding cups, just seem. We only have 3 more texts, which are all Rabbi Kagan. We have text 18 and 19 in his Mishnah Berurah, his clarified teaching. He says, what is this not to drink between the first 2? He says, maybe we're concerned about one who says, because if you were, then it would, maybe it wouldn't actually get drunk. Okay. Again, it's the drunkenness concern. Then text 19, he says, Mashma davka yain osher mashkin. What about tequila, other intoxicating beverages? No one has a problem with you consuming water or other non-alcoholic beverages. That is in his words. So now we get to text 20, our final text of this evening. He says, "V'chol zeh bein hakosos aval ein mazeg hakos v'hetchil lidrosh alav ba'agada in order to lahafsik be'emtza kachasuv haRamban b'hasagosav kasav haRan." So now he's mentioning these Rishonim that haven't been mentioned before about an issue that actually hasn't been discussed before, which is, what are you doing drinking during the Magid, during the Haggadah part of this evening? Now are you creating interruptions here? Maybe this could be a problem. And it seems from their words, you've only poured the cup, you're ready to say the Haggadah. There is another Rishon that says, no, it's fine for all this. Tosfos also so you're not allowed, whilst amidst these very particular blessings or other liturgical statements, whilst you're sort of within a bracha, so to speak, that would be interruption. But amidst the Haggadah, that's fine. You have these other Rishonim that are pushing back against that. V'hamachaber stam b'saif kedas Ramban afilo inyan koshel mitzvah Moshe Gozon b'vir hagra. So he says even for a koshel mitzvah, it's not really sure what he's saying. I guess you can, right? Did I misread that? It seems fine. It's a totally separate concept here of it's a separate concern. We're not talking even about drunkenness now. Right? This maybe you're just interrupting these things. It would seem to be this whole Machlokes Rishonim that really hasn't appeared in the Torah, really hasn't appeared in Beis Yosef.
So what he's saying at the end is, I don't know, will you get a kosher mitzvah here?
There.
But even if it's a kosher mitzvah, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's called a chomer.
These rishus, these rishus cups.
I'm not sure what.
I don't know either. I'm not sure where this is. I mean, granted, I need to do a deeper dive into this of like where these. You know what? Yeah. You know what? Maybe this is a whole separate deep dive I need to do into interruptions during Magid. But from what we've seen, the survey, this sort of broad survey of text we've seen this evening is, between 3 and 4, starting from the Mishnah and on to this day, you are not allowed to have another glass of wine between cups in 3 and 4. But, we saw Rabbi Yisraelis, who quoted a few previous folks, including Maharil, saying, but if you draw it out, it's not a separate cup, right? That's not a concern. And the sort of a big concern, Yerushalmi said we're not supposed to get drunk. That's why we're not allowed having that, because leading up to Hallel, because you still need to be able to say Hallel. And you had lots of wine throughout the night, even if you stuck with just these first 3 that could maybe, but you had stuff probably during the meal, right?
Really quick also.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Between 2 and 3, all we really saw was Rabbi Yisraelis just saying, "Hey, watch. Be careful about your intake. Don't go overboard. Also, you still have another part of the Seder, a whole bunch still left to do. Don't get super carried away amidst the meal." And then really a lot of this between 1 and 2, that really is a really fascinating set, because we start off with the Mishnah. Do whatever you want, drink whatever you want. We have no concerns here. The Talmuds don't say anything between cups 1 and 2. Yeah, it's all fine. We're on board with the Mishnah. Now we start to see some stuff arising that could be, however, problematic. At the same time, despite these potential problems popping up of between cups 1 and 2, maybe it could cause drunkenness, maybe forget to say things. Now we have these, as we saw in text 20, what if you have these interruptions? Perhaps it doesn't seem to be a dominant overriding concern. At the same time, we have also what we saw was the Mordechai, who pointed out, why are we concerned about, we did see maybe it seems as if you're mostly holocaustus, you're adding on to the cups. That is still the sort of like perceptive concern. At the same time, we also saw the Mordechai, who said, well, we have this, statement of Rava in the Talmud, having wine amidst, between cups 1 and 2 can actually generate a greater hunger for the matzah. We shouldn't be concerned about this. So surprising, we have different opinions. So, there is kind of this concern of, we have a long night ahead of us. Maybe we shouldn't get carried overboard. Maybe we shouldn't be getting drunk. We shouldn't look like we're having a bunch of other cups. But maybe there's room for it, because it could cause
a bigger issue between 3 and 4.
Right. At the same time, there's greater. So, yes, 100%. That's a greater concern. At the same time, there's a greater range of debate and opinions between cups 1 and 2 about the permissibility. There's a lot of rabbis throughout the generations who really said, maybe we should be careful, maybe we should be cautious. But we also have the Mordechai who says, what are you talking about? First of all, we have the Mishnah that says, it's totally fine. We have the Mishnah to begin with. That's a huge text, and the rest are rabbinic literature. And then we have Mordechai quoting, sort of indirectly quoting Rava about it causing a greater hunger. And we have the permissibility. We can drink between 1 and 2. The other thing that I'll throw in, which is a lot of what we're doing the Haggadah, the Seder night with Haggadah, where we're recounting the story. We're drinking throughout the night. Like, we're concerned now between 1 and 2. Like Haggadah, this is kind of like drunken Jewish history. Like, this is a great this is a great time. We're regaling tales of the creation, our origin story as a nation over wine. We're having a great time. We're having a great time doing this. Now we're going to hold off between one. So maybe there's something to be said for that.
I think the 3 and 4 kind of makes sense though. If you like take a step back and just think about the flow of the Seder, right? If you're trying to pound a cup between 3 and 4, when they come so close to each other after you've had the meal, after you've had the other 3 cups of wine, like again towards the end of the night, it's close to midnight. You know, like that's the point that I think they're saying. Like, all right, that might be like that might be a little too far.
Yeah.
And maybe you should withhold from that so you can really enjoy that fourth cup of wine.
Right. And we still have Hallel. We still have Hallel.
Like you should still be like a little focused. Like at that point, you should be
Once
going
you say
crazy.
it's permissible between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Are you supposed to not finish your first cup all?
No. This is a separate cup. The only one that we said you just sort of like continue is the third cup. But I don't know what that means. Like you're most of the way done. You just pour a little bit more, and like it's like an everlasting cup. You know, it seems to. Or like the Mishnah Berurah says, or Biur Halacha. Yeah. Which, don't get me wrong, maybe I will. But yeah, it's a really fascinating concept. Now, ultimately, I will say, and this is a teaser, this is an out-and-out teaser, this is, in addition to all these things that I have to do further inquiry into, in addition to the survey, is what about after the fourth cup? I'll just leave that. It's an entirely separate conversation.